This video is a review of my student essays on the Indispensable Opposition, the FRQ 2009 Form B. So my students wrote an essay in response to this prompt, and what I'll be reviewing this video is primarily the introduction. Now I'm talking about the introductions, but I'm also talking about the distribution of the points. So the thesis point is one of the 6 points that you can get in the exam for AP English Language and Composition. So the 1 point that is given is often to the thesis, and it is often found in the introduction. So my discussion today will be about how introductions can help you achieve this 1 point for the thesis point. You could also get up to 4 points for evidence and commentary, and up to 1 point in sophistication. I will make 2 other videos about this one and that one later on. Alright, so let's talk about the thesis. So the key to scoring 1 point in this section is to present an arguable thesis that will be defended throughout the essay. Right? Now the AP exam, the College Board website gives you different samples on what a thesis looks like, or what they consider a thesis to be, and what it's not a thesis. So let's break it down. A 0, right, is a thesis that fails to provide a defensible or justifiable idea, right, argument. So they tend to restate the language of the prompt, often verbatim or a very weak paraphrase, or they simply provide a summary of the text without an actual claim or a clear claim. In order to get a 1, you have to provide a thesis that can be defended, right? That means I can argue this and I can defend it throughout my essay. Now, it must be defended, and it must analyze the writer's rhetorical choices. I included this here, and it articulates, because sometimes you'll find examples where they'll accept one where the rhetorical choices are articulated, but the analysis is very thin, but they'll accept that as a thesis. So here's an example. Here are several examples of a 0. So the writer effectively uses rhetorical strategies to accomplish his purpose. So this one, the purpose and the rhetorical strategies are not explained. The writer effectively uses rhetorical strategies. Which one? To accomplish his purpose, which is what? Right? Strategies are not explained. John F. Kennedy uses strategies, which ones? To convince the nation of his vision to travel to the moon. Well, I mean, yeah, sort of. There's a claim here, but the strategies aren't even mentioned. So this one doesn't quite accomplish the goal. So on the day of the examination, this would not receive a point. Here's a summary with no claim. Kennedy speaks to the American people because he believes that going to the moon is important for the nation. This is true. All of this is true, but this is an opinion. This is not a claim. This is not a thesis. So here's 2 examples of a 1. And I'm giving you a below average thesis that is still a thesis, and an above average thesis that is a very good thesis, or, you know, the kind of thesis that we can say, okay, that's definitely a thesis. All right. Lincoln shared his thoughts by establishing a common ground through the use of religious references and repetition of set phrases. Well, I mean, there is the use of religious references, which gives me illusion, and the repetition of phrases, which is an attempt at parallelism, and shared his values. Now, this is pretending that the rest of the introduction, or what preceded here in the introduction, actually made a point. So we're going to give it a point. Here's an above average thesis. President Lincoln decries, there it is, right, a strong verb, the motives and the effects of the few people who are unjustifiably forcing the American people to shoulder the weight of economic recovery. He further engraves his position by utilizing charged words in an exasperating style. There it is. Everything is said here. Now, let's look at some of my student samples from the latest prompt that they just wrote. Again, the Indispensable Opposition, FRQ 2009. Alright, this one is too long, but it gets the point, meaning it gets the 1 point. And I say it's too long because you don't have a lot of time to write this essay. So if you're going to write an introduction this lengthy, then you want the rest of the essay to be equally as lengthy. Now, as it happens to be in this case, this intro comes from an essay that is equally as comparable to the intro, meaning the writer, my student writer, wrote the bodies and the conclusion, and they're pretty sizable too. So she was able to maneuver through the essay effectively and within the time allotted. So this is good, but you know, for some people, it may not be a viable possibility. So this is an example of one that is too long, but it still gets the point. We'll read some of it. In the year 1939, American writer Walter Lippmann publishes an article entitled The Indispensable Opposition on the Atlantic Monthly, where he criticizes the failure of American society in supporting freedom of speech and opinions, often political in nature, that differ from one's own. Wow, this intro sentence gives you a lot of info, right? It's still good, but it just gives you a lot of info. Mr. Lippmann employs the use of numerous rhetorical strategies, which include alluding to the notable philosopher Enlightenment era, intentional syntax, creative interest in diction in order to appeal to his readers and establish a condemning tone towards the individuals who take it upon themselves to advocate for the First Amendment rights of all and hold true the belief that all men and women are deserving of these liberties. Lippmann takes on the disparaging views so as to make known to his audience that all would be lacking in the aforementioned freedoms had these liberties been unequally spread across the whole society. I happen to think that this is a very good introduction. It gives you not only does it mention the strategies, but it explains them. Not only does it tell you the purpose one time, but it repeats it twice in different words, which is a nice little bit of parallelism. I think it's a very good introduction, but I think it's very lengthy. Now, this writer can do it. This writer wrote it and was able to finish the essay on time and write a hell of an intro, a hell of an essay. So this works for her. It may not work for everyone, but just as an example. Very good intro. All right. Too short, but it still gets the point, right? So writer Walter Lippmann discusses his views on how other people's opinions are equally as valuable as our own in the article, The Indispensable Opposition. Lippmann utilizes logic to walk the reader through his thought process in regards to the opinions and redefines what it means to be politically free. So redefines what it means to be politically free and uses logic to walk the reader. I can see the attempt at analyzing the rhetorical strategies. They're there. I assume that this writer will talk about them in the bodies, and the writer does, right? But nonetheless, it's kind of short. Now, maybe this is what this writer needed to do in order to write the body paragraphs where you can get the most points, right up to 4 points, and then move on. Sometimes, if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. But this one still gets the point. I got everything I need. I know the writer. I know the title of the thing. You attempt to give me an analysis of the rhetorical strategies, or you mention them at least, right? But this writer was able to finish the essay and score well. So there's something to be said about maybe sometimes if it's short, but you got to the point and you can move on, maybe that's something you need to do. So you have to consider what works best for you. All right, here's the right size, not the right stuff. So in a time when fascist Germany was gaining power, both the masses and the governments were truly contemplating the purpose of the right to political freedom, Walter Lippmann took his pen to the Atlantic Monthly to express his ideas. I like that intro. It's a very good intro sentence, right? In a time when this guy does that. Little phrases like took his pen, right? We're truly contemplating fascist Germany. I mean, it's just kind of neat, that introductory sentence. Lippmann discusses whether liberty is a right or a luxury, and asks a question of why tolerance is created in the first place to establish an argument for the necessity of liberty for others, even those of dissenting opinion. What is missing here? Why is it not the right stuff? The rhetorical strategies. Had the writer simply mentioned it in another sentence, right? Maybe an allusion here, diction and syntax there, whatever. Had the writer just mentioned that, I can sort of see it here. I can see what he's saying. For instance, when he says, asks a question of why tolerance, maybe the strategy is, I don't know, rhetorical questions, but I can't make allowances as an AP reader for the writer. I can't put there what I think you might have meant. You can only mean what you wrote. So this is an example of, unfortunately, the right size, very good intro, but it doesn't have the thesis, so it doesn't get the point, right? But one more sentence and bam, it would have gotten the point. Now, as it happens, for this essay, I did give it a thesis point because by the time the writer got to the conclusion, he wrapped it up. He gave me a thesis. So I was compelled to give it to him because there was a clear defensible thesis, though not in the intro. But you don't want to play that game. That's kind of dangerous, right? All right, this one does not receive a point and did not receive it for the entirety of the essay. In his 1939 article, The Indispensable Opposition, in the Atlantic Monthly, Walter Lippmann discusses freedom of speech and the ideal way human beings ought to go about it. This is true. I get the context and I get a bit of summary, but I need another sentence. What does he want to do with it? And what is he using in order to accomplish that purpose? I need more. It cannot end there, you know? That's why this one does not receive the point. Okay. Gets the point, but it needs a little work, right? Now, what I've done to this one is I have pointed out the things that I'm going to change. These are the things that I'm going to change. I'm going to read it now, but these are the things that I'm going to change. In 1939, at a time when democracy seemed at the brink of a shape with an impending war, Walter Lippmann writes an article titled The Indispensable Opposition. In this very article, he dismantles the very nature of democratic ideals in order to reveal the actual truth as to why man seeks them and needs them. He accomplishes this through the use of tone as well as an ingenious simile between our tolerance to obnoxious things and why we protect liberty. This intro still gets the point, though it may be a little clunky here and there. It gets the point, definitely, but it needs a little work. So I'm going to change these things that I'm pointing out to you. So this is what it looks like now. What I've highlighted in green means that I changed that. What I've highlighted in yellow, it means that I just sort of moved it around, rephrased it a little bit. Okay, so as a reminder, this is what it looked like before, and here's what it looks like now. At a time when democracy is being shaped by the impending war, Walter Lippmann's 1939 article, The Indispensable Opposition, reflects on the very nature of democratic ideals in order to preserve them, not as something we want, but as something we need. Now, if you go back here, what I did a lot of is I cut away at the first sentence and I blended the first and the second. Because the first sentence gave me everything I need, but it didn't give me the so what? What does he do with this, you know? So I made it into one. I took two and made it into one. And I cut away a few things at it. He accomplishes this with an abrasive tone. I just put some makeup on tone. He threw out tone and he didn't tell me what it did, so I just put abrasive. And then I sort of added what it did with his own words. So he accomplishes this with an abrasive tone that attacks those who claim to protect freedom of speech, as well as an ingenious simile that paints our tolerance of freedom as a tolerance of the obnoxious things. I meant to take out two. So in this revised introduction, all I'm doing here is putting some makeup, moving some things around, connecting ideas. It was all there, but it just wasn't in the right place, and I needed a little bit more. So this is what it looks like now, the revised introduction. Now, in the next videos, I will cover more information on this. Here we go.